All right, so this series starts very specifically in the year 1600. Why 1600? Coffee wasn't invented then. It had been around in the Ottoman Empire and in Yemen for hundreds of years. But in 1600, coffee became available enough in parts of Europe to function as a daily alternative to alcohol. And that changed everything. For the first time in European life in the 1600s, sustained sobriety became possible. Not universal, not moral, but structural. And prior to the 1600s, Europe ran on alcohol. Why? Beer, wine, ale, mead. They weren't indulgences. They were actually infrastructure. The water was unsafe to drink, and fermentation made it possible to have drink every single day. And for centuries, that system worked well enough, but your memory reset daily because you were drunk, basically from sunrise to sunset. And authority was more distant from the daily lives of people, and it was really questioned at length. You got up the next day, your memory was reset, and it was just going on drunk to drunk. So we slept it off, and we got drunk again as soon as we woke up. Coffee, however, in 1600 became more widely available. So why didn't this happen in 1500 or 1400? Coffee was around. It was around for a very long time, but production was concentrated. It was primarily in the Middle East. Supply was guarded. You couldn't get coffee seeds out of parts of the world because they wanted to constrain its ability to be grown and traded. And so without a dependable supply, it just can't become a daily habit. And it became much more widely available around 1600. Trade routes had matured, shipping routes were more predictable, insurance and finance began to stabilize risk. And we'll talk about that actually in another episode. But here's the other things. People started moving to cities, and literacy started to expand, and the printing press was available. Materials started to spread. Printing made it available for us to carry ideas, not just by oral tradition. And intoxication in that environment becomes a liability. Used to be functional, but it's not. Administration, accounting, coordination, logistics required a sober mind. And that's what we started seeing more in 1600. So coffee didn't create any of these pressures, but it did answer them because the sobriety allowed people to remain alert longer and to remember yesterday's conversation and to argue ideas without losing the thread. So it doesn't make people smarter, but it allows us to have sustained sober thinking over time. And once people can stay sober enough to think together longer, something else becomes visible. The institutions that were governing the world were built for a more passive world, not quite as active. So the rules lagged the reality, and authority assumed just regular compliance of people in the world. And power really relied more on just habit instead of legitimacy. And sustained sobriety recognized the mismatch. Now, here's the thing. By mid-century, 1650, coffee became public in England. The first houses were actually started in the 1650s, and this is the hard stop for this video because the habits had begun to shift and the conditions had changed. And what's happening yet is just a reaction, and we'll talk about that in the next series. We're going to be talking about those coffee houses and how in the mid-1600s that sobriety threatened the power structures.